I know it's super random, but
Long 10.
okay. So volume is kind of high.
History is full of truly epic last stands. The Second World War was no different and actually began with one of the strangest last stands in history. In this video, we tell the story of the postmen of the Danzig Polish post office and their bitter fight against the German onslaught.
I mean, bro, Postman. I am really intrigued about this. I have no idea what the Postman embarrassing the SS is going to be about. On the front. I love channels that are dedicated to World War II.
The scene of this epic defense was the free city of Danzig, a semi-autonomous city-state squeezed between Poland and German East Prussia.
Exactly. German East Prussia. This was the old German border, and Danzig was like one of the few port cities that Poland had. My paternal great-grandfather served in the Royal Air Force. When he was on his way to serve in North Africa, his ship got sunk by a submarine. He was stranded at sea for 24 hours. Wow, that's a great story. I had no family members that fought in World War II, but they were refugees from Europe, and that's how they came to Mexico. So yeah, I have a little Jewish in me. He was stranded at sea for 24 hours. That's really incredible. A great survival story. This is gonna be interesting. I never heard anything on this story. Yeah, me neither.
On the Baltic Sea.
I guess that's a lot of
was a
unheard
political anomaly created during the Treaty of Versailles as a compromise between Poland and Germany. As with every good compromise, no one was really happy, but no one wanted another war. Danzig was a rich port city, and Polish leaders wanted it to shore up their battered economy. All well and good, but close to 98% of the population was German.
Oh.
Such a high German population meant that when the Great Depression hit in the 1930s, Danzig followed Germany's lead in embracing Nazism. From June 1933, the Danzig government was...
Which is not always the case. Switzerland had a lot of big German population. Very few of them, almost none, supported the Nazi party. So not because they were German, they're
controlled by the Nazi party and cooperated
the Nazi government
at
the time. But
the city police were politicized and used to intimidate opposition journalists and political figures. The 1930s also saw the rise of Hitler's feared paramilitaries, the SA. Also known as the brown shirts due to their distinctive uniforms, these thugs were the Nazi party's enforcers. They were experts at intimidation, targeting politicians, journalists, Jews, and anyone else deemed undesirable. The brown shirts were essentially the precursors to the infamous SS, who became active in Danzig in 1939. The Danzig SS unit was well equipped, boasting 6 infantry companies and 2 anti-tank companies. There was no shortage of top-notch German weapons or military equipment for the Nazi forces in Danzig. The Danzig City Police Force became yet another arm of the Nazi intimidation machine. Under the command of Nazi city officials, the police worked closely with the brown shirts and later the SS. Armed with German-made weapons, the Danzig police contributed to the widespread persecution of the city's Polish minority. Relations between Poland...
Which I mean, at 2%, the Polish minority was truly really small, so very easy to intimidate.
And Germany deteriorated throughout the 1930s, coming to a head in 1938 when Ribbentrop, the German Minister of Foreign Affairs, demanded Danzig...
the pact with the Soviet Union. Yeah, no one saw that coming.
...be joined with Germany. Poland refused and the media seized it, establishing Danzig as a symbol of Polish sovereignty important enough to fight over.
The Molotov-Ribbentrop
This
pact
was broadly called the Danzig Crisis and was Hitler's major pretense for war with Poland. As war began to look inevitable, the Danzig police drew up plans to capture key Polish institutions in the city. They worked closely with both the brown shirts and the local SS unit, sharing intelligence and preparing weapons.
Famous scene of the Polish insignia being removed.
One of the key targets was the Polish post office, a building that was technically sovereign Polish territory. It wasn't just Danzig's Nazi factions and police that could see a war was coming. Polish officials could see it too. They also correctly guessed that the Polish territory in Danzig would get attacked first. To turn the post office into a defensible position, Polish High Command sent in the combat engineer and army reserve
They saw shit was coming, yeah.
Konrad Gudurski. Sub-Lieutenant Gudurski.
It's kind of like now and everything that's going on with Ukraine, huh? I don't know. I think it's really scary. I think I don't think there's going to be a huge war, but shit's going to hit the fan, you know? So I hope it's just like really small.
No time in preparing the building to withstand an assault.
Oh, there's the
Trees
post
and
office.
hedges were cut down to remove cover, doors and windows were reinforced, and barricades were erected. Sub-Lieutenant Gudurski also brought with him a cache of weapons for the defenders. They had 1 anti-tank rifle, 3 Polish-made Browning automatic rifles, 3 crates of grenades, and around 40 other bolt-action rifles and pistols. Their ammunition was extremely limited. Most impressive of all though, Sub-Lieutenant Gudurski managed to whip 43 postmen and clerks into a formidable military force.
Wow.
He appointed the postal worker Alphonse Flisikovsky as his second in command, and together they organized the men into squads. The postmen were equipped with weapons and taught to kill. The two leaders also worked out a defense strategy where they planned to hold out for a maximum of 6 hours before the Polish Pomeranian army would sweep in to rescue them. Other than the 43 armed and dangerous postmen, 13 Polish civilians were hiding out in the building, including the elderly.
We have 2 potential huge wars possible. Makes me worried as fuck. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I've honestly never... It reminds me a little bit of Crimea, but it looks like now the US and the European Union are ready, you know? I think they had sanctions on Russia, but there was no military intervention. And I think the European Union and the US have made it very clear that if Russia enters Ukraine, stuff's gonna happen, stuff's gonna go down. And I don't know what's your second one. Is it like China and Taiwan? That seems like a little bit less sensitive, but still it's like a huge issue, you know.
The caretaker, his wife, and their young daughter.
But wow, we're talking about
the post office was a
and
fortress,
caretakers.
And the postmen were committed to defending
just
it.
regular ass postmen, dude.
The mitral naval guns of the German battleship SMS Schleswig-Holstein boomed over Danzig at 4:45 in the morning of
China and
September 1st,
Taiwan,
1939.
For sure,
the ship was shelling a Polish army garrison in another part of the city, and the sound of her great guns was the signal to commence the attack on the post office. This was the opening salvo of the Second
World War. They really
War.
wanted to take that post office.
The police were the first to attack. Supported by an ADGZ heavy armored car and the local SS unit, the supposed peacekeepers of the city launched a frontal assault.
Oh wow, I love that there's video of this.
Simultaneously, a demolition charge blew out a large part of the building's outer wall. The attackers fought their way inside but were forced to retreat in the face of a grenade barrage and massed pistol fire from the determined postmen. 2 Germans were killed and 6 more were wounded in this first assault. Entering through the hole blown out of the wall, the Germans launched a second flanking assault. This was stopped when Sub-Lieutenant Gudurski fragged himself and several attackers with his grenades.
Wow.
After the first 2 attacks, the Germans pulled back.
Damn.
Newspaper reporters and Danzig civilians had turned out.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an expert on war and like fighting and stuff, but if you are on a building, you have a really good defensive position, right? So it's going to be hard to take you in, especially, you know, it's over 40 people, which presumably I think he mentioned that had guns and stuff. No training, but they had guns, so it's not going to be that easy to take on, especially like a
to watch.
Smaller
Some
German
had even been
force.
invited to witness an easy victory. It wasn't going to plan. The champions of German nationalism were losing to a gang of Polish postmen. The time now was 11 o'clock, 6 hours after the attack had begun. Every hour the defenders held out was more embarrassment for the German commander. He borrowed 2 75mm field guns and a 105mm howitzer from the Wehrmacht and began shelling the building.
Oof.
With artillery support, the post office was assaulted again. The postmen held the line.
Oh.
Pulling back, the Germans began firing.
Oh my god, dude. They resisted artillery shots to a building. That's insane.
A mortar in an attempt to dislodge the defenders. It was so badly sighted, however, that shells started raining down all over the place, posing more of a threat to the Germans than to the postmen.
Of course.
Adopting a classic
a
tactic of
double-edged
medieval
sword.
siege warfare, the German commander decided to dig a sapping tunnel underneath the walls of the post office. He called a ceasefire and gave the postmen 2 hours to consider an offer
This is
of
nuts,
surrender
yeah.
while slowly undermining
crazy,
them from
man.
below. The sap was finished that afternoon, and at 5 o'clock that night, a massive explosion rocked the city. A 600 kilogram bomb had been detonated underneath the post office, bringing down the last of its defensive walls.
Ooh.
The Germans rushed in and captured the ground floor of the main building, but the Polish postal service wasn't done yet. The defenders
They
retreated into the
weren't done. Holy shit! It took a bomb, artillery shots, and like literally the German military, like armored vehicles and stuff. Yeah, respect to these postmen, 100%. They defended not only their city, their people, but their post office.
basement and dug in. Desperate to end the embarrassing fiasco, the Germans advanced into the basement and were cut down by the postmen.
Yeah, the
who
leaders
were
are like, what the
still
fuck's
holding
going
out.
on?
Wisely understanding that a basement full of 30 odd heavily armed and angry postmen is not somewhere you want to be, the German commander decided to burn the defenders out.
Ooh.
A railway car full of gasoline was requisitioned and the fire brigade pumped it into the basement. The fuel was ignited with the grenade blast and 5 of the defenders were rapidly burnt to death. Many more were wounded.
Jesus.
It turns out that fire is a postman's only weakness. Under the threat of being cooked alive in the basement, they finally surrendered. The postmen were let out under a white flag by Jan Mihon, the post office's director.
Yeah, I mean, Jesus. It's not only about the fire, but the heat. It's literally, you're surrounded by fire and walls. You're literally gonna be cooked alive. It must be pretty horrible. But yeah, that's what happens when people have a reason to fight.
Furious
They
at
fight
being
like hell.
humiliated by a gang of postmen, the Germans shot Mihon dead.
Oh,
The postmaster, Józef Schwaszik, was then burned alive with a flamethrower.
oh my God.
5 of the burned postmen died in
Jesus.
hospital, along with the caretaker's 10-year-old daughter, who was
Oh.
forced into the gasoline-filled basement with the defenders. 10 more defenders received medical treatment before being locked up with the others in a makeshift prison. On the 8th of September, the first half of the
Like, this
postmen
is
were
when it
tried
gets
in a kangaroo court.
Real.
As civilians who had taken up arms, the Nazis convicted them as illegal combatants and bandits. They were sentenced to death. Their comrades in hospital received the same sentence just a few days later.
I wonder if
The postmen
some
were
survived.
executed in September by firing squad, but 4 managed to escape from the prison and survive the war in hiding.
whoa.
Even by SS standards, these sentences were harsh. Born out of revenge, they reflect the German embarrassment
Yeah, burned alive, firing squads. That's pretty harsh. And it's horrible. But hey, for survival, I
having
wonder if
taken so long and resorting to such underhanded means to capture
like any
the
of them
post
wrote a book
office.
or something.
The final tally shows the postmen defended their post for 19 hours
Whoa.
against a combined force of over 180 Germans,
Wow.
equipped, mind you, with artillery and armored cars.
And a bomb. Holy shit. 180 Germans. He mentioned like around 45 postmen with no training, just guns. Wow, that's really impressive.
The Poles killed 10 Germans and wounded 22, while only losing 8 of their own during the siege. Defiant to the end, the postmen of the Danzig Polish post office
Oh, that's-
rebuffed every attack, only succumbing when they were mined from below or had fire
That's
poured
wholesome.
from them from above. That was the story of the postmen of the Danzig Polish
Oof.
post office and their
Kudos to the
life.
guys who got away. We might not know their story if they were no survivors. Yeah, that's true. I mean, we know what happened because of them. And out of 40 something, 4 survived. I hate it for the other 35 or 30 something that couldn't make it. But wow, I'm really glad that this
stand
story.
on the very first day of the Second World War. What do
first day,
you
yeah.
think about the German siege tactics? How far would you go to protect the mail? Are you a bit scared of
Wow, what a scene that must have been. Jesus, I wasn't expecting it to be that good. It was really good. I mean, it was a great story. One of those World War II stories that, I don't know, I personally love to hear. I love to hear the story about survivors. I personally, World War II is like my favorite historical event. Well, probably one of the most favorite. But Jesus, that was insane.